Hello YouTubers, this video goes out to two YouTubers, one being a Super Mr. Atheist, which is pretty self-explanatory, and the other is a user going by the name of Babytron, who is a Christian. I'm making it because I've noticed that both make claims that are false in both of their videos. Now first, I would like to briefly address Super Mr. Atheist video called Chances for God is not 50-50. While I agree with this claim due to the fact that there is no evidence for the existence of God, and all of the science that has been done over the years gives extremely strong evidence against the necessity of a God, you went on to say this in your video.
There is no evidence for God existing. There will never be evidence for God existing. More and more, every day, scientists are making new discovery, but none of them will give evidence for God existing. And that's how it should be. What theists, mostly Christians, forget is that God will never give you evidence for his existence. That would break down the whole religion. Christianity is based off of faith.
Okay, to assert that there will never be evidence for God is a fallacy. While I have no belief in God, to effectively say that it is not possible for evidence to exist is demonstrably wrong. It can only be true if you are able to prove 100% that God doesn't exist, which as we know is not possible. That being said, I still agree with you that God is not a 50-50 proposition, as I have never heard any argument that doesn't crumble under scrutiny. The reason I comment on this is because if we fail to use truthful and correct statements, we are giving ammunition to theists who, believe me, will use them at every opportunity. Okay, now on to the user Babytron, who responded to Super Mr. Atheist's video with obviously a video of his own. I'm going to play your first clip now.
The reason for this is a lot of people think that there is no evidence to suggest that there is a God. And that there also is no evidence to suggest that there is not a God. If this is true, then it would be that there's about a probability of 50-50 chance that God exists.
Okay, as I said earlier, it is not possible to prove 100% that God doesn't exist. Well, this doesn't matter. The burden of proof lies with the claimant, i.e. the theist. And since they can provide no compelling evidence worthy of investigation due to all of them being either straw men, full of logical fallacies, or in some case blatant lies, we must conclude that while not 100% proved, the chances of a God existing are very small. Can't give an accurate figure due to the nature of the debate, but it's certainly not a 50-50 chance.
Actually, I believe that science evidence for theism, in the sense that there has been science used in arguments to suggest that God exists. The teleological argument, the cosmological arguments, such as the Kalam cosmological argument, are good examples of this. They use science in their premises to formulate logical conclusions that suggest that there is some type of bodiless mind or prime mover or creator God.
Well, this is where you start to lose me entirely. Where's the science you speak of? The teleological argument, though having several different forms, is effectively the watchmaker argument. This is a pseudo-scientific bullshit argument. It effectively comes down to irreducible complexity, which is one of the intelligent design movement's favourite old chestnuts. However, the argument has been refuted over and over by evolutionary biologists and most other people with any modicum of common sense and intelligence. I suggest you search YouTube for some videos on this, or even Google it, because there's many people who are far more qualified than me to explain this to you. And as for the Kalam cosmological argument, well, effectively it's one big logical fallacy. This is the argument for first cause. Now, let me ask you something. I don't know. Now, is that a viable answer to you? Because it's far more truthful than, oh, that can't be explained, therefore God must have done it. That's no better an explanation than one day I dropped a cigarette, it fell through a hole in time to the beginning of the universe, and somehow exploded, creating the universe, therefore we are all made from a bit of tobacco and some stale ash. want to finish that point. If God is the first cause, what caused God?
You're setting up a problem here. You're trying to say that either science can prove it or it doesn't exist. But there are a lot of things that we can't prove with science that we assume to exist. It sounds like you're taking up a position called scientism, which is the belief that all things that exist can be proven with science. But if you're trying to hold that belief that the only things that can be proved or proved with science, then how do you prove that the only things that can be proved or proved with science? You can't. You have to go into metaphysics and come up with some type of abstract law or some type of metaphysical law. Every day, yeah. God would never give you evidence for his existence. How would you know this? It sounds as if you're making some type of assumption as to what this God would be like. We have no idea from your stance what this God would be like if he does exist. But I take the stance of a theist that believes in the Christian God. So I believe that this God would show that he exists. In fact, I think he did so by coming down as in human form and doing miracles and among other things.
Well, now you're just really losing me. See, the thing with science is that science adapts itself, and it makes new experiments and actually discovers new ways of finding things out. And I just don't understand where you're coming from with this. You believe that God came down and performed miracles.
This makes absolutely no sense. There's nowhere in the Bible that says that there cannot be evidence, or that there should not be evidence, or that you should not be looking for evidence. In fact, it says to love God with all of your knowledge and to be ready to defend the faith. And he has done things that would be evidence. For instance, I don't want to get into it because it's a very touchy field, and I feel like the metaphysical arguments are way more supported. But there are historical arguments to suggest that the miracles that occurred in the Bible actually happened. So why would it be the case that God would come down as a human being, bring people back from the dead, and resurrect his son, and yet all the time not want anybody to have any type of evidence to believe that he's real? It makes...
Okay, that's enough of that. It's sort of going around in circles now, but I have got one question to ask. I want to know, where is this apparent evidence that these miracles happened? Pretty sure that if he had any real validity, they would be pretty well known to most of the modern world at least. Now I suggest that you do some research into the people giving you this information. If it isn't somebody like Ray Comfort or William Lane Craig, I'm betting it's someone just as unscrupulous. And that's pretty much all I've got to say, so bye for now, and I'll record another video soon.